I'm Wendy Orr, and I'm a writer, primarily of children's fiction. I have written some adult fiction as well. And I live in beautiful Red Hill now for the last 20 years. Yep, I'm a creative writer, I guess. And I do actually, it is my career, I do actually manage to make a living out of it somehow. One of the things that really started my interest in stories and writing stories was when I learned to read and write in English, because we lived in France till I was 7, but my family spoke English at home. And our French readers were really, really boring. And then we moved back to Canada, and so my parents, before we moved, thought it'd be really handy if I actually learned to read and write in English. They left a little Dick and Jane reader by my bed one night, and I got up in the morning and I read it. And after I read it, I realized I'd read a whole story, and it was in English, our own language. And so reading a story in my own language was so powerful. I remember running down that cold little house with its marble floors and running into my parents' bedroom and saying, I read a story. I really think that was a moment that made me want to be a writer. So in 1986, I think, I was working as an occupational therapist, and I was crossing the road to go out to lunch with a friend, and she said, did I tell you I've written a book? And I'd actually been feeling that I wanted to do something more, and I thought, I've said I'm going to write my whole life, so when am I going to start? And on January 2nd, I actually just started experimenting and writing. I had no idea what I wanted to write. I just wrote everything I could think of. I wrote short stories. I tried A Mills and Boon because I thought they ought to be easy. And at the end of the year, there was an ad for a Scholastic picture book text competition. So I thought, I'd never tried to write a picture book, but my children were 3 and 5. I actually used picture books at work. So I was just immersed in picture books. And I wrote this one, fairly quickly. And I sent it off, and I got probably the most bizarre congratulations acceptance letter. It was, we had a huge number of entries. They were all terrible. But yours and one other one were suitable for publication. You have to change the ending, and we'll publish it, and here's your prize. But it was such an amazing experience, when you have something that you've dreamed of and then it actually happens. And you really can't believe it. And so it was a really lovely experience. And the book did quite well. It stayed in print for about 25 years and was published overseas. And so I was really very lucky with this first little book. And then I thought, well, maybe I should go on writing children's books. So it probably really shaped my career. Probably the most pivotal moment in my writing career, the one that really made me believe I could be a writer, was the first time that I was shortlisted for the Children's Book Council of Australia Awards. So that was just probably the most significant award I've ever had in terms of changing my life. One of the neat things about Nims Island is that what I like to call the first draft was when I was 8 or 9. But we went out to see my grandparents, and then we also took a ferry across to see a great aunt. And it was a little tiny island, really like the size of a school auditorium or something. And I thought, I just want to run away and live on that island all by myself. And so I wrote a story about a little girl running away from an orphanage, and then a little boy ran away from his orphanage, and they lived together on the island. And I needed a little boy because, of course, I was the little girl, and I knew I couldn't kill the fish myself. But so I started writing this story, and it was quite different, of course, at the start, as it always is. And it was another one that actually took a long time to work out its form and work out what was happening. And so it started partly because two little girls wrote to me one week. I just won Book of the Year with Ark in the Park, and so I was getting a lot of letters. And I don't think these girls were from the same school or anything. They basically wrote identical letters. Can you please write a book about me? So what if a child wrote to an author, and what if they went on writing? And what if the author actually, it was, like this really famous author, and well, I can't write a book about you because I write very adventurous, important books, and you're just a little girl. But the little girl's life is, of course, much more interesting than the author's. And for me, it was immediately obvious that that was because she lived on an island. And so I was playing with this, and I wrote it in so many ways. I wrote it as letters and journal entries, and it was absolutely dead on the page. And finally, I just really went into myself and thought about the story that I'd written when I was 9. And not so much about the story itself. What I was thinking about was the child who wrote it. And the next morning I woke up, and in a palm tree on an island in the middle of the wide blue sea was a girl, and that was just there for me. And I just wrote the first couple of pages, and I thought, this is it. And I phoned a friend, and I read her those first few pages, and I got to a bit where Fred the marine iguana eats the coconut, and my friend, who's quite a famous writer herself, Pamela Hart or Pamela Freeman, and she said, but Wendy, I don't think marine iguanas eat coconut. I said, shut up and listen, Pamela. And the next line is, marine iguanas don't eat coconut, but no one had ever told Fred. So the book then just took off for me like that. And I mean, we still had editing and drafting, but basically it came out like that. Then it did quite well in the States as well. So that meant it was in the Los Angeles libraries. And so a woman walked into the library and she saw this bright, shiny new cover, and she needed a book for her 8-year-old son's summer reading. So she took it home and wrote to me 2 weeks later and said, well, please know I'm running to inquire if film rights are available. And I tried to write to my agent, and I said, this is really exciting. And so we worked together on this movie. Obviously she worked harder, but we contacted each other, email or phone, every day for 5 years. And amazingly enough, it became a movie. And it was the most incredible experience to see the book, these people who had been with me for 30 years, and they were alive. And the first time I arrived on set, Abigail Breslin was running through the rainforest with this little Fred on her shoulder. And I mean, it was just completely out of the book. And we had the world premiere at SeaWorld, and then they flew me off to, do a bit of a tour. And it was, a phenomenal experience. And it's not how I would like to make my living. Sure, I'd be happy to repeat it once. Who wouldn't? But it did not give me a desire to go on to do that sort of thing. What I really like is writing books. And I probably prefer the quieter world of the books. But it was just amazing to see such a different world and to work in a team when I've never worked with anyone else from my writing, except for when we get to the editing stage. And to actually be involved in writing the script and the first 2 drafts of the screenplay, I mean, it was just such a learning experience. So my advice about writing is that if you're writing for publication, you do have to remember this is very different from writing for yourself. And creative writing is a beautiful way to express yourself. And writing a journal can be really good for the soul. And sometimes you can write something really cathartic and angry or sad, and you can burn it. But if you're writing for publication, you need to remember that you are actually writing for people that you don't know, that you will never meet, people right across the country and perhaps across the world. It's actually quite a lot of responsibility to get it right. And so you have to be serious about your craft, about going on improving your craft. But that seriousness has to be fun. And fun is what makes you play with a story. You're playing with it like a child playing with imaginary friends. They are all imaginary friends. And they live with you for years, so you've got to like them. Or, hate them in a good way if they're really bad. But you're playing a game. And you have to have fun experimenting with different ways of writing. And experimenting with finding what is in your heart to write. You need to be able to just explore whatever it is you want to explore without worrying about what's going to sell.